affects your heart, what doesn't affect your heart.
You and who? Mary, Carrie?
Oh, no. Meat and dairy.
Oh, dairy. Oh, I know her and him. Dairy, okay.
Here we go.
Well, I like pictures of airplanes, so I'm going to read this about the airplanes. Daddy, get me an airplane.
Good morning. This is Bill. I'll be reading from the Omaha World Herald and tell you about the Lincoln Journal-Star deaths and funerals.
And this is Jack Gibbs, where we are sharing again the Omaha World Herald. And we'll try to read the article only once, but sometimes we just might not hear what the other guy has said. So we may be a little duplication, but we'll try not to do that. Anyway, starting off, I guess in this case, I was telling Bill, there's a picture here of an airplane. I like airplanes. So this news comes from Langley, Virginia. Also want to wish you all a good rest of the week, and we'll be giving to you all the news that we can do in the next couple hours. From Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, President Obama claimed progress yesterday in the U.S.-led fight against Islamic State, even as political turmoil in Iraq and renewed violence in Syria threatened to jeopardize hard-fought gains. During a rare presidential visit to CIA headquarters, Obama said it had been what he called a few bad months for the Islamic State and gave a detailed account of areas where U.S.-backed forces have wrested territory back from the extremist group. Though he acknowledged that the fight remains difficult and complex, he said that the Islamic State was on the defensive and that the U.S. intends to keep that momentum. Every day, ISIL leaders wake up and understand that it could be their last, using an acronym for the extremist group. Obama offered no new steps or specifics about how the U.S. will beef up the fight against the Islamic State, although U.S. officials have suggested that those steps are in the works. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has said the Pentagon is seeking ways to increase military support for the fight, including a likely increase in U.S. forces, along with the possible use of Apache helicopters for Iraqi-led combat missions. The visit to the CIA's campus in suburban Virginia was designed to assure Americans that the U.S. is fully engaged in the fight, despite separatist persistent complaints that Obama's critics that his strategy isn't aggressive enough. They are working around the clock to keep us safe, the president said, adding that the CIA operations had thwarted terrorists repeatedly without being able to acknowledge it publicly. They don't get a lot of attention. Although Obama gave an optimistic portrayal of progress in Iraq and Syria, the picture on the ground remains muddled at best. In Syria, escalating fighting between the government and militants has threatened to jeopardize a fragile ceasefire that the United States and Russia brokered earlier this year. The uptick in violence in Syria has raised difficult questions about how to proceed if the truce falls apart and frees Assad and his Russian backers to resume attacks on U.S.-supported opposition groups. In Iraq, Obama pointed to the Iraqi military preparations to retake Mosul as an example of increased momentum. Yet, modest signs of progress have been tempered by ongoing sectarian challenges and a political crisis in Baghdad that threatened to further destabilize the country. Obama's remarks at the CIA came the week before he travels to Saudi Arabia for a summit with Persian Gulf leaders, focused largely on the Islamic State. Previewing his request to countries attending the summit, Obama said, the entire world must step up to help Iraq restore stability so that ISIL cannot return. Bill.
Thank you, Jack. New look at 70 study on dietary fats stirs the pot. That rigorous study, a report now reveals, did not link heart disease to eating meat and dairy. It was one of the largest, most rigorous experiments ever conducted on an important diet question. How do fatty foods affect your health? Yet it took more than 40 years for a clear picture of the results to reach the public. The fuller results appeared late Tuesday in BMJ, a medical journal, and included some never-before-published data. Collectively, the fuller results appear to challenge the conventional wisdom regarding dietary fat that has persisted for decades and is enshrined in influential publications such as the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the government's official diet advice book. And the long-belated story of the Minnesota coronary experiment suggests just how difficult it can be for new evidence to see the light of day when it contradicts widely held theories. The story begins in the late The story begins in the late 60s and early 70s when researchers in Minnesota engaged thousands of institutionalized mental patients to compare the effects of two diets. One group of patients was fed a diet intended to lower blood cholesterol and reduce heart disease. It contained less saturated fat, less cholesterol, and more vegetable oil. The other group was fed a more typical American diet. As researchers expected, the special diet reduced blood cholesterol in patients, and while the special diet didn't seem to have any effect on heart disease, researchers said they suspected that a benefit would have appeared if the experiment had gone on longer. There was a favorable trend, they wrote, for younger patients. Today, the principles of that special diet, less saturated fat, more vegetable oils, are included in the dietary guidelines for Americans. Yet the fuller accounting of the data indicates that the advice is at best unsupported by the massive trial and appears to show just the opposite. Patients who lowered their cholesterol, presumably because of the special diet, suffered more heart-related deaths than those who did not. The higher rate of mortality for patients on the special diet was most apparent among patients older than 64. The new researchers, led by investigators from the National Institutes of Health and the University of North Carolina, conclude that the absence of the data over the past 40 years or so may have led to a misunderstanding of this key dietary issue. Incomplete publication has contributed to the overestimation of benefits and underestimation of potential risks of the special diet, they wrote. Had this research been published 40 years ago, it might have changed the trajectory of diet heart research and recommendations, said Daisy Zamora, a researcher at UNC and a lead author to the new report. The new research could agitate the debate over one of the most controversial questions in all of nutrition. Does the consumption of so-called saturated fats, the ones characteristic of meat and dairy products, contribute to heart disease? It is an important question. Heart disease is the leading cause of mortality in the U.S., and Americans eat a lot of red meat and dairy foods. The federal government has long blamed saturated fats for heart troubles and continues to recommend that people limit their intake. The dietary guidelines continue to embrace the principles advocated by the Minnesota researchers, advising Americans to limit their intake of saturated fats and to replace them, at least in part, with oils, just as the Minnesota experimenters did 40 years ago. But the idea that spurning saturated fat will by itself make people healthier has never been fully proved, and in recent years, repeated clinical trials and large-scale observational studies have produced evidence to the contrary. The new research adds to the previous findings, calling into question the health benefits of diets that reduce consumption of saturated fats in favor of other foods. What this research implies is that there is not enough evidence to draw strong conclusions about the health effects of vegetable oils. Christopher Ramsden, a medical investigator at NIH and a lead author of the report, said in an interview, "It is not exactly clear why the full set of data from the Minnesota experiments was never published. As researchers' efforts on diets go, the study was very rigorous. Funding by the U.S. Public Health Services and the National Heart Institute, it involved more than 9,000 patients, but the results of the study were never touted by the investigators. Partial results were presented at the American Heart Association conference in 1975. It wasn't until 1989 that some of the results were published in the medical journal Arteriosclerosis. The lead investigators of the trial, scientists Ansel Keys and Ivan Frantz, are dead, but Stephen Brost, now a retired biostatistician, was a student at the University of Minnesota and used the full set of data for his master's thesis in 1981. He interacted with the researchers. Part of the problem, he suggested in an interview, might have been limits on statistical methods at the time. But Brost also suggested that at least part of the reason for the incomplete publication of the data might have been human nature. The Minnesota investigators had a theory that they believed in. So when the data they collected from the mental patients conflicted with this theory, the scientists may have been reluctant to believe what their experiment had turned up. Here's Jack.
Very good, thank you. This news comes from Arizona. On April 4th, on the day she turned 72 years of age, Ann Rogers awoke to a hummingbird flitting its wings in her face. The sun was just starting to come up over the ridge, and she watched as the bird flapped about before zipping away. The joyful encounter allowed her to forget briefly where she was, or rather that she had little clue where she was. This much Rogers knew. That was, she and her 2-year-old rescue dog had spent the previous night huddled next to a fire she'd lit on the site of an abandoned homestead. They took turns sleeping on the red satchel that contained everything that Rogers had with her, everything that she was able to take after she left her blue Ford Fusion on the side of a path leading to who knows where. It had been 4 days since Rogers left her home in Tucson, bound for her daughter's home in Phoenix. 4 days since she took a way wrong turn, she said, and ran out of gas. 4 days since she last saw another human being. But that was just half of the journey. It'd be 5 days until Rogers was found. 5 days until she heard a small rescue chopper make its slow way around the canyon's serpentine walls. 5 days until she was taken to the hospital, where the doctor discovered that she was suffering from exposure, but otherwise miraculously in how fine condition she was. Rogers recounted this in a phone interview on Tuesday night from the comfort and the warmth of a friend's home in Tucson. A week before, though, as the hummingbird faded into the distance, human contact and medical treatment had felt a world away. Rogers was supposed to spend her birthday with her grandson, but now she had gone terribly astray. Rogers shouted her frustration at the canyon walls, which only echoed her weary voice back to her. "Why the hell am I still here?" she said. "Why hasn't anybody come down and found me yet? Damn it!" Unknown to Rogers, there were at the time several teams scouring the White Mountains for her, but they had little idea of where to look. The last person who spoke to Rogers before she lost cell phone reception was her friend Bruce Trees, whom she texted to say her car broke down. Trees, who was a retired Marine, became worried when Rogers stopped communicating with him on April 1st. He called and called her, but got no response. Then he started calling local authorities. On April 3rd, Detective Johnny Holmes of the Gila County Sheriff's Office received a call from the White Mountain Apache Forest Rangers. They said that they heard a woman was lost in the area around Fort Apache Reservation and that they needed the help looking for her. Some people found her car, and inside her car was a hungry cat. It appeared that the car had been abandoned a few days earlier. The following morning, Rogers' birthday, Holmes' team began a quick search of the area with people looking through the bushes and following tracks, anything that would give them a sign of the direction she was taking on foot. The Rangers and the Arizona Department of Public Safety worked together with searching and rescue squads out of Gila County and Payson, Arizona. By the end of the first day, we had no clues on which way she was traveling or whether she got a ride out, Holmes said. She hadn't even contacted her family beforehand, saying she was headed to Phoenix. Indeed, Rogers admitted over the phone the visit to her daughter was going to be a surprise. She hadn't seen her daughter and grandchildren for almost a year, so Rogers decided to just make the drive herself. She wanted to arrive in time for her own birthday and her grandson, which happened to be on the same day. Rogers was on the road to Phoenix on the 31st of March, she said, when she noticed her car was running out of gas. She asked someone for directions to the gas station in the nearby community of CBQ, but following those directions, Rogers somehow found herself 21 miles away with no gas station in sight. Rogers, Queenie, and her cat, Nike, spent the first chilly night huddled beneath layers of clothing and blankets. At first, Rogers felt well equipped to weather the time before anyone found her by simply remaining in her car. She had cans of fruit and chicken and nuts and protein bars, as well as clothing to keep her warm, except on the third day, she only had water. She had left was contained in a small jar that she shared with her dog. I knew very well that you're never supposed to abandon your vehicle, Rogers said, but the choice was either to leave it or go without water. And how long can you do that and survive in the desert? Accompanied by Queenie, but leaving Nike behind, Rogers set off for the creek. She brought along a red satchel stuffed with drawing papers, journaling papers, a sketchbook, a pen, a lighter, and some matches. For days, Rogers and Queenie traveled vaguely in a southwest direction that made campsites out of the canyon's many crevices, and at one point, curled up inside a cave as thunderstorms came. Rogers was as prepared as anyone could be for the journey ahead in the mountains. An artist and practitioner of Reiki therapy, which is a form of spiritual healing, Rogers grew up surrounded by nature. Meanwhile, the detective Holmes and the rest of the search and rescue teams were also getting desperate. By the eighth day, they were joined by cadaver-sniffing canine dogs. Start getting more days into it, and your probability of finding her starts dropping, Holmes said. We were expecting the worst, but hoping for the best. Searchers descended on the sign that she found, or that they found, and found a handwritten note nearby. It read, "Am lost, trying to find people or ranch, hiking on downstream, no food for 3 days." And it was signed Anne. They found the dog first. 15 minutes later, they saw Rogers. She was taken to a hospital. When Rogers entered the emergency room, it was her turn to be surprised. There were her son and daughter, whom she had intended to see all along. I grabbed them and gave them a great big hug. Then they moved away a bit because I stunk so bad, like campfire smoke. Yeah, I suppose you would after 8 days.
Too scary, huh? North Korea ghost ships mystify Japan. Some vessels float out of the haze with a crew of bodies and no clues to how they died. From Wajima, Japan, Shizuo Kakutani sees no great mystery in most of the things that wash ashore in Manzen, his quiet fishing village on the Sea of Japan, the fishing boats ravaged by winter storms, the Chinese garbage carried to the land by the strong winds, the occasional body that drifts in from Yasino, the nearby cliffs notorious for suicides. The ghost ships, however, are harder to explain. On an early morning in November, the retired fisherman received a call from his colleagues at the town's civilian coast guard. A black mass bobbling in the water, probably a boat, had been spotted hooked to a distant buoy. When I saw the boat, I immediately knew that it was from North Korea, Kakutani said. He had seen similar vessels before, no more than 30 feet long, made of wood, their flat-bottomed hulls covered in tar. Then, as we were pulling the boat to this port, we noticed a pair of legs sticking out from underneath, bobbing up and down with the waves, Kakutani said. Later that day, they found 2 more boats carrying 10 bodies, all badly decomposed. In small towns along Japan's west coast, dozens of North Korean boats drift ashore each year. Most arrive empty or reduced to kindling, but some emerge from the haze with a crew of bodies, adding to the mystery of a country that cloaks itself in secrecy. At least 14 of the boats, carrying more than 30 decomposing corpses altogether, have washed ashore since late last year along a 1,000-mile stretch of the coast, puzzling Japanese investigators. Who were these people? What happened to them? The boats bore unmistakable signs of North Korean origin. Their hulls were emblazoned with painted numbers and Korean script. One was marked State Security Department, another Korean People's Army. All of those aboard appeared to be male, although some were so badly decomposed that investigators couldn't be certain. All wore civilian clothing. Autopsies found that they had been dead for about 2 months, but the cause of death was elusive. Perhaps they were defectors, analysts surmised. Then a new theory surfaced. Satoru Miyamoto, a North Korean expert at Japan's Seiga Quin University near Tokyo said that the men on board probably were fishermen and probably belonged to the North Korean military's commercial branch. The soldiers don't have any training, so they sometimes get lost at sea, he said. The crews may also run into extreme weather. Boats may have flipped and righted themselves again. Those overboard probably drowned, starved, or died of hypothermia. Kakutani was more mystified than alarmed by the ghost ships. The fishing town has long been awash in macabre discoveries. We have a rumor of a ghostly figure of a lady appearing at the pier, he said, but that's been a rumor since way before the North Korean ships began arriving. The mystery boats continue to arrive. In January, fishermen in Nagata found a small boat apparently from North Korea, partly submerged about 8 miles from the coast. It remains in the city's port awaiting demolition with all of its contents, fishing nets, a man's jacket, and a rusty old motor. Coast Guard officials say disposing of the boats has been a bureaucratic hassle. The 3 boats discovered off Manzen floated unattended for months before they were dismantled, destroyed, and incinerated. Wajima, the municipality that oversees the town of Manzen, couldn't afford the disposal, leaving the local government ministry to cover most of the $13,500 bill. A Wajima government spokesperson said the bodies were cremated and their ashes sent to the Soji Temple, a Zen Buddhist compound on the city's outskirts. They are being held no differently than the other ashes, a monk said. In death, we treat everyone the same. 1021. Here's Jack.
Well, Jack's here, except he can't find page 2. I got the first page.
Here's page 2. You can use
Oh, okay. That's what nice thing about having 2 newspapers and 2 guys. We can share.
Yeah.
Okay, it says, okay, immigrants bill, okay. That's 5B. Here's page 2, okay. I'm gonna start with page 1. It's not 1022, so it's time to move on to state and local news.
Okay.
And this comes from Lincoln. Nebraska lawmakers passed bills yesterday to give $20 million worth of property tax reduction to farm and ranch landowners, and to create an independent commission of citizens to redraw the state's political maps. LB 958 represents the second part of the governor's property tax package. Lawmakers sent to the governor's desk on a 47-1 vote. The measure would add $20 million annually to the state's property tax credit fund. The new money would go to owners of agricultural land, boosting their property tax credit to about $108 per $100,000 of valuation, starting next year. Under the bill, the amounts allocated for tax credits to residential and commercial property owners would remain at the current level. Ricketts named property tax, there we go. Property tax be shared among the 11 learning community districts. Instead, the money will go directly to the local school district. The total district level will be kept at $1.05. The question is how the rest of the article goes. The question is, which districts will gain financially under the bill? Which will lose? And here's the answer. 8 of the 11 learning community districts will come out ahead financially when property taxes and state aid are factored in. 3 will lose money according to estimates from the legislative office. The estimates are based on 2016 figures and assume that property tax levies remain at current levels. The picture could change by the time state school aid and property taxes are calculated next year. 2 districts, Springfield, Platteview, and Douglas County West, most likely would lower their tax levy. So they would not gain as much as shown, and then it has about 10 or 12 different districts that will gain. In losing 3 districts, will qualify for transition aid equal to half of their losses. And here's the next question. What impact will this legislation have on school districts outside of the learning community? And here's what the answer is. The bill won't affect state school aid for other school districts but it will require all districts to set policies about transportation of students opting into the district. Schools will be allowed to offer free transportation to transferring students who qualify for free lunches. So if you get a free lunch, you get a free bus ride, I guess.
Yay! Thank you,
How
Chad.
about that? Yeah.
In the Omaha metro area, turkey breaks into home trying to fight his reflection. A turkey that broke into a northwest Omaha home last month is recovering nicely from some cuts it received while smashing through a large picture window. He apparently got startled by his own reflection and started to fight with himself, Elizabeth Hillpepper of the Nebraska Humane Society said Wednesday. He was probably glad to get out of there when our animal control officers showed up to capture him. The turkey left a trail of destruction through the house on March the 31st, but escaped major injury, Hillpepper said. He was taken to the Humane Society before being picked up by volunteers from the Nebraska Wildlife Rehab Incorporated to recuperate. When the turkey is all better, they will probably release him back into the wild, Hillpepper said. Our animal control officers do respond a lot to calls like this about wild animals and do a great job. This week is National Animal Control Appreciation Week, Hillpepper said. The Humane Society officers had a busy 2015. Animal Control responded to 6,387 calls about wild animals trapped, injured, or otherwise endangered. The busiest month of the past year was August, when officers received 948 wildlife calls. Overall, Animal Control responded to over 40,000 calls, an average of 3,339 per month. And a scammer pretends to be from the sheriff's office. An Omaha man is out of nearly $3,000 after a phone scammer claimed to be with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office convinced him that a warrant had been issued for his arrest. The 53-year-old man told police that he received a call about 11:30 a.m. Monday from someone identifying himself as a member of the sheriff's office using the name of a real lieutenant. According to a report filed with the Omaha Police Department, the caller told the man he had failed to show up for duty on a grand jury and was being sought for arrest. To avoid arrest, the man was instructed to obtain 3 prepaid bank cards, 2 for $938 and the third for $1,000. The caller said that if the man contacted police, he would be arrested. After the man got the cards and provided the card numbers over the phone, the caller told him to mail them to the clerk of the Douglas County District Court. He also was told to appear at the sheriff's office there. There he learned that he had been scammed out of $2,876. When the man called the scammer back to ask for his location, the man taunted him. "I'm at your mom's house. Thanks for the $3,000. Here's Jim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Not welcome, huh?
Yeah, here's a story about a fire here in Omaha. A Tuesday night fire at a northwest Omaha apartment complex was caused by the careless use of a charcoal grill on an outdoor deck. The fire, which caused an estimated $225,000 in damage, was reported about 11 o'clock in the evening. It started on a deck outside a third-floor apartment at the Maple Ridge Apartments, southwest of 108th and Maple Road. Flames then spread into the apartment and the attic spaces of several other units. The fire grew quickly, partly collapsing the roof of the apartment building before being brought under control in about an hour. The Red Cross says some 23 residents were displaced from the apartment building located at 111th and Cottonwood Plaza. No injury was reported. Firefighters rescued 3 cats. The building, which is just west of the strip mall that contains a branch of the Douglas County Treasury's office, suffered heavy water and smoke damage. Wednesday, burned roof tiles were scattered on the ground around the building, which is in the southeast part of the complex. Among other items visible outside the apartments were scorched satellite dishes, chairs, insulation, and things like that. Crews reached the scene at just before 11 o'clock, 5 minutes after a resident reported the fire. According to the Tim McCall, who's the battalion chief. The second alarm was declared about 5 or 10 minutes later, which brought additional units to the fire. It was declared under control just before midnight. The estimated value of the structure was $6.5 million, and its contents were valued at $250,000. The estimated loss to the building was $125,000 to the contents. Those living in the 12 affected apartments were getting help from the Red Cross in conjunction with the apartment's management. Tara Berg, who is the regional manager for the Maple Ridge Apartments, praised the efforts of the firefighters and the Red Cross volunteers. Berg said she was finding vacant apartments in the Omaha area for those displaced. Right now, we're taking care of our residents, she said, and we're just glad nobody was hurt. Wednesday morning, firefighters still were at the scene, putting out hot spots and interviewing witnesses. A resident who lives in a neighboring building said the fire could have posed bigger problems. It might have been a lot worse if it had started on the ground level. According to the resident named David, who wouldn't provide his last name, he said his son came home and spotted flames coming from a third-floor balcony. He sent out 911, then ran outside to record the blaze on his cell phone. The video he shot captured images of a man carrying a baby and a boy carrying a younger boy. All were escaping in their underwear out of a door on the southwest side of the building. There were embers falling all over, David said. Yeah, fires are scary. Yeah.
I'd say. Thank you, Jack. In the Nebraska legislature, immigrants bill in governor's hands. Ricketts, despite earlier opposition, hasn't said whether he'll vote or veto the bill to extend work licenses to DACA young people from Lincoln. Against the wishes of Governor Pete Ricketts, Nebraska lawmakers on Wednesday passed a measure that would allow young immigrants to obtain professional and commercial licenses. Legislative Bill 947 passed the last of three rounds of consideration in the Nebraska legislature on a 33-11 vote. But the bill's fate is unclear as it heads to the governor's desk. Though a vocal opponent of the measure, Ricketts, through his spokesman Wednesday, again declined to say whether he would veto it. The government vetoed a similar bill last year, which provides driver's licenses to young people in the federal DACA program or deferred action for childhood arrivals. The legislature overrode that veto. If the governor vetoes LB 947, its sponsor, State Senator Heath Mello of Omaha, would need 30 votes to override. Ricketts has until Tuesday to sign or veto the bill. I'm still trying to make the case to the governor, Mello said after Wednesday's vote. DACA is an executive order by President Barack Obama that allows some people brought into the country illegally as children to have legal presence here. To be eligible, an applicant must come to the U.S. before turning 16, must have lived here since June of 2007, must have no significant convictions, must be in school, have graduated, or have obtained a GED, and must have been under the age of 31 when DACA was created. LB 947 is aimed at helping young people who qualify for the program. It also would allow professional and commercial licenses to be granted to applicants for certain types of valid non-immigrant visas and people with the applications pending for asylum in the United States. The state requires such licenses for more than 170 occupations, such as teachers, nurses, and cosmetologists. As amended, the bill also spells out that if the immigrants such as DACA recipients lose their legal presence in the country, they will be ineligible for professional and commercial licenses in the state, and it clarifies that no public benefits other than the licenses would be extended to such immigrants. 10:34, here's Jack.
Here's some news from the Capitol. A debate without a vote in the Nebraska legislature can be like a slice of pie with the Alamo. State senators engaged in a brief discussion yesterday about a resolution to end lunches paid for by lobbyists and served to senators in the Capitol. But they moved on without taking a vote, to the surprise and chagrin of the resolution's sponsor, Senator Ernie Chambers. Legislative Resolution 414 was one of three resolutions given a 30-minute time limit on Wednesday's agenda. With senators still waiting to speak about the free lunches at the 30-minute mark, the next resolution was taken up without a vote on Chambers' proposal. I just had the shoe of the speaker applied to my posture without warning, the senators. And the Speaker of the House, Galen Headley of Kearney, disputed that characterization. Hadley, who sets the agenda, said Chambers could have called for a vote before time ran out. The resolution sought to stop lobbyists from buying catered meals for lawmakers during the final weeks of the legislative session. Served in the senator's lounge behind the chamber, the lunches cost about $10,000 last year, according to the lobbyist who organizes them. State law caps gifts to senators or their family members at $50 in value, but places no limits on food and beverages. Rather than forks and knives, lawmakers employed a bit of verse during the debate. Quote, "Then, Lord, when dawns that glorious day, legislators shall fast as well as pray," Chambers said. Replied Senator Glore of Grand Island, who said, "And I'll admit I've eaten lobbyist bread. Yes, free meals. I've had a few, but it's never changed my view. If your bill's a stinker, I'm still voting red." I don't know what that means. Okay, Chambers urged his colleagues to consider what the public must think of the practice. He said the lobbyists' lunches demean the legislature, and he suggested the senators were selling their souls for a few what they call meatloaf sandwiches. How many of you would be proud to have your constituents come here and stand around and watch as you clear this chamber and go sponge off the lobbyists, he asked. Senator Lydia Brash of Bancroft and other lawmakers called the meals a time-saving convenience during long days of debate and said food doesn't sway votes. Senator Dave Bloomfield of Hoskins voiced concern that the discussion disparaged the lobbyists who, he said, provide useful information to lawmakers as they try to weigh all the bills introduced every year. Chambers said he would propose the meals measure again next year as a bill instead of a resolution in an effort to get lawmakers to vote on it. First, though, the senator must win re-election to another 4-year term.
Thank you, Jack. This time, supporters weigh in on the project, and that project is a chicken plant. An opponent says he welcomed the chance to hear others' views on the proposal from Fremont. Supporters of a proposed chicken processing plant took a new tack Wednesday, organizing themselves to speak in favor of the plans for the first time in a public forum. People on both sides of the issue packed the Dodge County Board hearing room in Fremont in a standing room only crowd. Supporters said the project would bring needed growth to the rural county. The economic benefit to this area, this region, is enormous, said Chuck Emanuel of North Bend, Nebraska, a member of the Nebraska Corn Growers Association board. A farmer from Hooper, another Dodge County town, said the chance to add chicken houses to row crop farms is an opportunity to boost farm revenue, which in turn would give the next generation a chance to stay on the farm, he said. If we don't allow economic development, people's children and grandchildren end up going to other states, even let alone Omaha and Lincoln, farmer Scott Wagner said. Fremont resident Kathy Ray, RHEA, owner of the Arlington cattle feeding business and a Fremont Chamber of Commerce Ag Committee member, said recruiting agricultural related business makes more sense than dreaming about high-tech companies. If we're going to sit around and wait for that, we're never going to have an economic development in Fremont, Ray said. Following heated opposition to the plan at an April 4th Nickerson Village Board meeting, the Alliance for the Future of Agriculture in Nebraska told plant supporters not to attend on April 5th Fremont City Council meeting, where the opponents planned to again speak about the chicken plant until the mayor unexpectedly adjourned the meeting without taking public comment. The Ag Group's director, Willow Hullebeck, said Wednesday that the county board meeting was orderly and a good venue for discussion. Project opponents were there too and reiterated concerns about traffic, waste, disease, and an influx of workers. Randy Ruppert, an organizer opponents group Nebraska Communities United said after the meeting that he welcomed the chance to hear other views. This is what we have been asking for. Debate, the good old American debate, Ruppert said. They've been cloaked in secrecy, and this is the first time we even got to hear from the opponents. The name of the company behind the project still is being kept secret. State and local officials have refused to name the company. County Board member Bob Missel, the owner of a Fremont clothing shop, told the World Herald that he knows the name of the company behind the plans, but has agreed not to disclose it, although he said he didn't sign a formal non-disclosure agreement. Here's Jack.
Did you read the article about property tax relief to the governor?
No,
By
I
chance,
don't
or
think- I don't
starts
think
right
so.
there?
Yeah, no, I did not.
Okay. Just trying to keep it just, we only say it once.
Yes.
It's about property tax relief and the governor. Nebraska legislators passed bills yesterday to give $20 million worth of property. I read this.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because that's, well, I'm gonna read it. Yeah, I read that at the very, very beginning. Okay, this is under our briefly column. It's about a turkey that broke into a Northwest Omaha home last month.
We read those two.
You know all these?
That top one and the second one. That's all we have.
Those are two best ones around. You're taking my. About the scammer, right?
Yes.
Or the scanner. No, this scammer. Okay. What didn't you read? I was trying to look for something.
Here, how about this one? A woman accused of stealing a semi full of beer.
That's an intriguing headline.
Yeah.
We're about a woman accusing a full of beer. Then we're going to move on to the obituary, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, called in an ale arming libation larceny. That's what it starts out. An intoxicated 38-year-old woman stole a semi-trailer, stocked with beer early Wednesday and crashed it into a Lincoln ravine, according to police. An employee of a beer distributor had parked the semi-trailer to unload beer at a convenience store at about 5:30 in the morning. The vehicle was not running, but its keys were in the ignition and its doors were unlocked. Lincoln police said when the employee walked from the store, he saw the truck running and a woman at the wheel. He hopped up to an open door, but found it locked. He called 911. The woman intentionally rammed a cruiser that arrived as she drove from the lot. An officer was seated inside but was not injured. Police began to pursue the purloined beer truck. Later, the driver intentionally swerved toward an officer who was outside his cruiser, preparing to deploy stop sticks. Police said the officer got out of the way unhurt. Police ended the pursuit. A short time later, a University of Nebraska Lincoln police officer found the semi-trailer on the school's east campus, according with the suspect still in the cab. The woman was ticketed on suspicion of auto theft, flight to avoid arrest, 2 counts of assault on an officer, and driving under the influence. Yeah, I guess so. That must have been a lot of fun.
Big trouble.
Oh, I guess he still ran after a policeman, stole a truck, and then drank the beer.
Oh my God.
What'd you do today? Oh,
Well, let's move on.
okay, let's move on to something more serious, I guess, with obituaries.
Here are the deaths and funerals from the Journal Star. And the first is Mary Lee Adams of Nevada, Missouri, born September 1931, passed away April 9th, age 84. Ann E. Bruce of Lincoln, passed away April 10th, born October 1941 in Sioux City, Iowa. In lieu of flowers, please make donations in Ann's honor to the Friendship Home of Lincoln. And the funeral home is Roper & Sons. Carroll, Carroll, Angeline, I think it's Angeline M. Carroll of Fairbury, born April 1911, passed away April 10th, 105.
Ooh, wow.
Isn't that something?
Great for her.
Cooper, John William Cooper, age 66 of Beatrice, passed away April 8th. And that's Harmon Wright Mortuary, Beatrice. Eicher, E-I-C-H-E-R, Verba J. Eicher, age 89 of Milford, passed away April 13th. And that is Lobermore Funeral Home in Milford. Frank, Doris M. Frank, age 85 of Seward, passed away April 8th, born September 1930. Memorials in care of the Doris Frank family for future designation and arrangements entrusted to Zabka Funeral Home, Seward. Haskell. Harry, they called him Dean Haskell, age 70, passed away April 10th. Memorials to the family for future designation, and it doesn't show the funeral home. Hirschner. Lad Hirschner, age 67 of Utica, passed away April 9th. The private family service, and it's Volsky Funeral Home. Hevelone, Hevelone, Helen Hevelone of Fairbury, born May 1941, passed away April 10th, age 74. Higgins, Don Higgins, age 81, and Joyce Higgins, age 80, passed away on the same day, April 8th. They were both born on October 13th, 1 year apart. Memorials may be given to the Food Bank of Lincoln or Donor's Choice, and the funeral home is Roper & Sons. Lauterbach. Truman, they called him Truman F., they called him Doc Lauterbach, age 94 of Sprague, passed away April 11th, born January 1922. Memorials to the family and Kunkel Funeral Home, Crete, is handling. Leininger, M. Anita Leininger, born April 1927, passed away April 12th, age 89. March, Donald Leroy March of Plattsmouth, born July 1931, passed away April 10th, age 84. Marshallek, John T. Marshallek, age 90 of Raymond, passed away April 11th. Born November 1925 on the family farm in rural Raymond. Memorial to Saints Mary and Joseph Catholic Church, and the funeral home is Marcy Svoboda. Ott, excuse me, O-T-T-E, Edith M. Ott of Beatrice, born October 1929, passed away April 13th, age 86. Pape, Orlin Henry Pape, age 79 of Lincoln, passed away April 10th, born near Cortland on April of 1937, and was an Army veteran. Memorials to the Kansas Audubon and St. Teresa Catholic Church in care of Marjorie Pape. And Botharis Mazer and Love Funeral Home is listed. Peregrine. JT, they called him Bud Peregrine, age 94 of Lincoln, formerly of Endicott and Grant, died April 6th. He was a World War II veteran. Memorials to Horace Son Hospice in Lincoln or Family's Choice. Gertismeyer Funeral Home, Fairbury, is in charge. Phillips, Wayne Phillips, passed away April 8th, served in the United States Navy, retired from Burlington Northern Railroad. Memorials to the Southwest Fire Department in Lincoln or the Capital Humane Society in Lincoln, and Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is listed. Quinn, Lyle Browse Quinn of Fairbury, passed away March 14th, born November 1918 in Fairbury, served in World War II in the Army. And that's a Gertismeyer Funeral Home, Fairbury, in charge. Schmaderer, Robert G. Schmaderer, age 92 of West Point, died April 12th. That's Minnick Funeral Home in West Point. The family suggests that memorials be directed to the GACC endowment in Bob's name. Schulz, S-C-H-U-L-Z, Judith Ray Vernon Schulz, age 76 of rural Pierce, died February 3rd, born March 1939 in Lincoln. A celebration of her life at 1 p.m. Saturday, April 16th at Christ United Methodist Church, Lincoln. Smith, Roberta A. Smith of Beatrice, born September 1949, passed away April 10th, age 66. Stows, spelled S-T-O-H-S, Loretta D. Stows of Odell, born November 1932, passed away April 12th, age 83. Sullivan James Dale, they called him Jim Sullivan, died April 13th, born October 1931 in Utica, and that is Metz Mortuary, York. Tamke. Teresa Lynn, they called her Terry Tamke, age 62 of Lincoln, passed away September 9th. Born September of 1953 in Lincoln. Memorials are suggested to the family for future designation, and the Ferris Mazer and Love Funeral Home, Lincoln, is listed. Tice, T-I-C-E, Jerry, I think it is G-E-R-R-Y, Jerry L. Tice, age 69 of Lincoln, passed away April 9th, born July 1946 in Lincoln. In lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to the Hope Community Church, to the Cornhusker Early Ford V8 Club, or the March of Dimes, and Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home, Lincoln, is listed. And the last is Worley, spelled W-E-H-R-L-I, Geneva M. Worley, age 93 of Lincoln, passed away April 9th. She was born in Valeska, Iowa, October of 1922. Memorials to the family for future designation, and Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling. Those are the deaths and funerals in the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Thank you, Bill. And here are the obituaries from the Omaha World Herald. Anderson, Jesse M. Anderson, age 91. The Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Heafy and Hoffman is handling the funeral arrangements. There will be, there are no, I thought there were memorials here. There's a memorial hospital. Next one, Astudo. Oh my. Reverend Lucian S. Astudo, age 86. The Bethany Funeral Home is in charge. In lieu of flowers, family requests memorials to daughters of the Eternal Father, or the Priestly Society of St. Peter, or Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary in Denton, Nebraska. Bulk, spelled B-O-U-C, Kenneth L. Bulk, age 72. Roper and Sons is in charge. Memorials can be made to the Alzheimer's Association. Davis, Gail A. Davis, age 55. Heafy Hoffman is in charge. Memorials will be directed by the family. DeFontaine, Marion F. DeFontaine, age 99. The Seaver Sprick Funeral Home in Fort Calhoun is handling the arrangements. Dennis, Edna Cleo, her maiden name was Zappel, Z-A-B-E-L. Dennis, Edna Cleo Dennis, age 81. The Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Heafy and Hoffman is in charge. And memorials may be made to the Alzheimer's Association, or to the First Presbyterian Church, or the Hillcrest Hospice. Edson Lloyd D. L. called LD. Edson, age 97. Yeah. Heafy and Hoffman is in charge. Fleming, Peggy C. Fleming. Jenna Gentleman is in charge. Fried, or F-R-I-E-D, Sam Fried, age, didn't give it age. The Jewish Funeral Home is in charge of the arrangements. There's no age given or date of birth, so I don't know how old Sam was. Anyway, the Jewish Funeral Home is handling the arrangements, so you can get that information from them. Gordon, Margaret J., called Peggy Gordon, age 78. Heafy Hoffman is in charge. Memorials can be made to the to John L. and Margaret Gordon Medical Scholarship Fund at Creighton University, or to St. Vincent de Paul School, or the Sienna Francis House. Hicks, Robert W. Hicks, age 80. The Bremen Mortuary is handling the arrangements. Higgins, Mary L. Higgins, age 87. Ethan Hoffman is in charge of the arrangements. Memorials may be directed to the family. Hulsey, Hulsey, Richard George Hulsey, age 68. The Road Mortuary is handling the arrangements. I'm looking for memorials. What does it say about memorials? Or donations. Donations can be made in his memory to the Davis Middle School, who plans to create a model train club in remembrance of Rich and or the Henry Doorly Zoo Railroad contribution. Jarosz, spelled Jarosz, Zygmunt, called Zig, Jarosz, age 89. Johnny Gentleman is in charge, and memorials are suggested to the Holy Harper Hospice House. Clamor, Hedwig Clamor, age 96. Johnny Gentleman is handling the arrangements. Memorials are suggested to Newcastle or the charity of your choice. Livingston, Richard M., known as Rich Livingston Jr., age 73. The Dugan Funeral Chapel in Fremont is handling the funeral arrangements. Next one is Longstein, spelled Longstein, Karen K. Longstein, age 71. The Road Mortuary is in charge of the funeral donations, the funeral itself. In lieu of flowers, please consider a donation to the Karen Longstein Music for Kids Memorial. Lucas, Marcella L. Lucas, age 92. Ethan Hoffman is in charge. Memorials may be made to the Nebraska Heart Association or the American Cancer Society. Malik, Nellie M. Malik, age 84. The West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is in charge of the funeral arrangements. McGee, Johnny McGee, age 66. Johnny Gentleman is handling the arrangements. That's all there is, I guess. Okay. Metzger, Metzger, Kenneth Dwayne Metzger, age 92, of Syracuse, Nebraska. The Fusaman Allen Harvey Funeral Home, located in Syracuse, is handling the arrangements for the funeral. Memorials may be made to the Syracuse United Methodist Church. Miller, Wayne E. Miller, age 69. The Road Mortuary is in charge. Passion, P-A-S-I-O-N. Evelina C. Passion, age 82. The Bethany Funeral Home is handling the funeral arrangements. And the next one, Polonsic, I'll spell it Polonsic. Anthony Joseph Polonic. No, Polonsic. Yeah, Polonsic, I think it is. Age 68, of Central City, Nebraska. The Salt Wegner Funeral Home in Central City is handling the arrangements. Next one. Ratunli, Ratunil. Ethan Robert Ratunil. There's no age given, and there will see memorials can be made, or should be made, or should be directed to the family. The Ethan Hoffman is handling the arrangements. Ruzicka, Charles Bahumili, no, Charles Bahumil, Bahumil, spell it, this is the middle name, B-O-H-U-M-I-L, L.I. Last name was Rosica, age 87 of Colon, Nebraska. The Saburo Funeral Home in Wahoo is handling the arrangements. Memorials can be made to the Saunders County Lost Pets or Saunders County Food Pantry. Schmetterer, Robert G. Schmetterer, age 92 of West Point. The Minnick Funeral Home located in West Point is in charge. Memorials can be directed to the GACC endowment in Bob's name. Schunk, Schunke, Schunk, Senior Master Sergeant of the Air Force retired, John L. Schunk, age 80. The Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Heapy and Hoffman is in charge of the funeral arrangements. Memorials can be directed to be directed by the family. Selker, Catherine, she's a member of the RSCJ. I don't know what that. Do you have no RSCJ? I have no idea what nunnery that is. Age 95, but the last name is Selker, Selker. Well, here it is, right below. Is Religious of the Sacred Heart. That's what it is. Memorials may be made to the Society of the Sacred Heart located in St. Louis, Missouri. Shatta, Mark F. Shatta, age 60. Johnny Gentleman is in charge of the arrangements. Memorials may be made to the family for later designation. Shidler, Shidler. Richard E., known as Dick Shidler, age 75. The Colorado Mortuary located in Papillion is handling the arrangements. Memorials are suggested to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Sims, Trudy M. Sims, age 63. The Thomas Funeral Home is in charge. Stewart, James Albert Stewart Jr., age 88. Memorials can be made to the Merrymakers, located on 120th and Shamrock Plaza here in Omaha. The West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Salintek, Peggy L. Salintek, age 47. Evie Hoffman is in charge, and memorials can be made to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Tatro Foley, that's the last name, Tatro Foley. Viola J. Tatro Foley, age 99. The West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Memorials are suggested to the Nebraska Humane Society or the Springfield United Methodist Church. Van Horn, Russell E. Van Horn, age 81. Evie Hoffman is in charge. Memorials are suggested to the King of Kings Lutheran Church or the American Heart Association. Van Tersch, Gloria Collins Van Tersch. The Forest Lawn Funeral Home is in charge. There's no memorial shown. Voss, Luann K. Voss, age 54. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Memorials can be made to the University of Nebraska Foundation Fund, which is the Bone Marrow Transplantation Fund. Weatherly, Laura L. Weatherly, born age 56. The Forest Lawn Funeral Home and Cemetery is in charge of the funeral. And memorials are suggested to the Nova Treatment Community in her name. And then it has something about her name, and it gives her address, 8502 Mormon Bridge Road here in Omaha, where the zip code is 68152. Welch. Well, this is the last obituary from the Omaha World Herald. Welch with a CH. Rosemary Welch, age 90. The Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Hoffen is in charge. And memorials may be made to the Discovery Presbyterian Church.
Thank you, Jack. The time is 11:05. Listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter. Jack and I will be right back. We hope you will be too.
All right.
What's the new gal's name? Do you know? We're gonna have to.
Who that is?
Hello, everyone. Here's how I get here, and I would like to invite you to an event.
There for a long time, there was nobody. Then all of a sudden, he's got 3 people. I knew Sarah and I knew Brian, and that was it.
There's something in the air bugging the heck out of my lungs.
Again? Did you have that last week too?
I think so, yeah.
Is it just here or is it out? Is it out? Is it home or out in the
I
woods?
notice it most when I have to keep talking. I
Okay.
kind of whistle. My lungs kind of whistle.
Yeah. Let me see if I can.
What do you want me to whistle?
Hi ho, hi ho.
I do like to whistle. I've got it's a nervous habit. I don't even know I'm doing it most of the time.
You're doing what?
Whistle.
Oh, you whistle, really? No, I haven't. I'm not aware of it.
We used to have a neighbor that when I lived in my old hometown, and when she was working, she whistled all the time, and I think that kind of influenced me.
Just kind of a low grade whistle, just that.
Just a whistle. I don't know if there was even a tune.
Do you whistle at home?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you mean every place? You don't not particular.
Oh, yeah. Just. I don't get it. Don't understand it. Oh, say there's some fruit out there and some delicious grapes. If you like grapes.
Oh, yeah, I do. The red ones.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
They're tasty.
Oh yeah. We bought the first maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
They went like that. I usually don't have my Joyce put the bowl right near the sink where you can't resist them. You know, you wash your hands and you take a grape.
Yeah.
And you bought some more yesterday at the store. Yeah.
Tell you what, another thing that's really good right now is asparagus.
Oh,
It's about like $1.50 a pound, and it is.
That's pretty good price.
Oh, yeah. Oh, here we go. Here we go again.
Okay, we're here and we're going to start with our second half of our broadcast this morning. Starting off with editorials and the public pulse. So here's some public pulse things right here. Get the microphone out of the way so I can read the paper. The first one is written by Jim Miller of Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. Here's what he has to say. Well, we didn't win the coveted Most Compassionate Legislature award, but we retained the Dumb and Dumber tale. I'm going to ask Omaha Senator Chambers, as soon as he puts down his semi-automatic pen, to sponsor more caring and compassionate bills next session. We should legalize medical marijuana to those who have seizures and get some relief. Let's cancel all senators' health insurance until they approve coverage for those who can't afford it. Let's ensure that those who want to work can, regardless of race, religion, or sexual orientation. We should legalize marijuana for recreational purposes and slap a huge tax on it. Next one is written by Deo Rezak of Omaha. According to the Food Research and Action Center, Nebraska has the second lowest participation rate in the nation for programs that provide free lunches for all students. The legislature will not approve expanded Medicaid to our uninsured or underinsured Nebraskans, which involves some 97,000 people, or medical marijuana for people whose suffering could be alleviated. Does anyone in power care about the poor people in this state? And why do those poor people keep electing these same lawmakers? This letter is written by Simon Noel, and he has this to say: unless Plan B site has already been selected, one of the many variables that HDR should consider in the construction of a new headquarters building is the effect such a structure would have in terms of an enhancement to the downtown Omaha skyline. In this regard, part of the green space at the entrance to the Conagra campus would be ideal, and it was within proximity of the former 11th Street site that was considered. And this note from Charlotte Myers from Hamlet, Nebraska. She writes this: I really appreciated Matthew Hansen's column of U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. And I guess the article was entitled "Strange Time to Be the Gym Rat," but it's embracing. I voted for Sasse based on a couple of sound bites. I don't know the depth of his knowledge. We Nebraskans should be proud of our senator, and his courage should be commended.
And the next one they call no action, lots of inaction. March 9th, Public Pulse writer Gary Fitch posits the notion that Republicans have had a mandate since the elections of 2014. I seem to recall both Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and then Speaker John Boehner proclaiming loud and clear, since the Republicans now had control of both the House and the Senate, the country would be gape-mouthed in astonishment at the Republicans' ability and willingness to govern. That was 2014. It is now 2016. My question is this: exactly when is this amazing program of governance going to begin? So far, all we have seen is the same old obstructionism, up to and including an outright refusal to do their constitutional duty. All the Senate has to do is hold hearings on President Barack Obama's nominee to the Supreme Court and hold an up or down vote. But Justice Antonin Scalia was barely pronounced dead before McConnell announced there would be no hearings on the replacement. No nominee has yet been named, and he was already refusing to do his constitutional duty. I believe that if King Solomon himself were the nominee, McConnell, Senator Chuck Grassley, and the other Republicans, including Nebraska's, would still obstinately refuse to do their sworn duty. Some mandate, that is, a mandate to do nothing, signed Mary M. Reusser of Omaha.
It's Nebraska.
And the next interpretive reading, the spot-on April 1st letter from Public Pulse writer Janet Mose notes that Republicans love to cite the Constitution and then to try to interpret it in their favor. They come by this trait honestly, as the evangelical right-wing fringe to which the party panders uses similar tactics with the Bible, signed Steve Bashang, Omaha. And the last from the Public Pulse is a mom and accountability. Recently, while driving south on the interstate, I was run off the road by a young man driving a company truck. I had the right of way, and he sped up, forcing me to the shoulder. He continued west, driving way too fast and weaving in and out of lanes. I called this local company to complain about its irresponsible driver. To my delight, a very nice woman listened to my story, laughed, and said she was the owner of the company and the driver was her son, and that she would certainly be taking care of the situation when he arrived back at the office. After inquiring about my well-being, she thanked me for my call. She is the mother that all young men who are driving should have. She never once tried to make excuses for his behavior or suggest I might be at fault. She said that he was accountable for his actions, and it was her responsibility to make sure that he knew that. We could all learn a lesson from this mother in raising responsible adults, and that was penned by Sandal Sandal Yeaman of Omaha. And here's Jack.
Very good. Here's an editorial written by Jennifer Rubin, who works for the Washington Post newspaper. As with the Republicans, the Democratic presidential debates have become rather predictable and therefore unrevealing. The moderators ask variations of the same questions. The candidates give variations of the same answers. That does not mean there is a lack of material. There's plenty to ask at this week's debate. From Hillary Clinton, we would like to know. 1. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas says going into Libya was a mistake. Why is he wrong? What, if anything, in retrospect, would you have done differently with regard to the Egyptian uprising against Hosni Mubarak? Should we have cut off aid to the Palestinian Authority if it continues to incite violence and refuses to negotiate? You said you would go beyond President Obama's executive orders on immigration. However, a federal court has blocked his actions. Why would your executive orders succeed? Would you put any Republican in your cabinet? If so, who? Hasn't the recent ceasefire in Syria given Bashar Assad a new lease on life? Isn't this a big win for Russia and Iran as well? What would you do on taxes, healthcare, and the rest of your domestic agenda if the Republicans have House and or Senate majorities? The teachers' unions have opposed a number of school reforms, including charter schools that you previously supported. Are you willing to stand up to them when they oppose reform measures that have proven successful? On what issues? Would you have made the grand bargain budget deal with the then Speaker John Boehner of Ohio? Would you go back to the Simpson-Bowles deficit reduction plan? If not, how would you address the debt? The economy is growing a little more than 2% a year. Is that good enough? If not, how would you promote economic growth? Senator John McCain of Arizona is called a maverick for opposing his party on some issues. Are you a maverick? On what issues do you depart from the conventional liberal position? Then there is Senator Bernie Sanders. This is the question she'd like to have answered, she being the writer of the article. We would like to know, you don't have a specific plan for breakup by the big banks. Why not? You really have no position on whether Israel should go back to the so-called pre-1967 borders? What responsibility does Hamas have for conditions in Gaza? You accuse Israel of indiscriminate bombing in the Gaza war. Are you saying Israel committed war crimes? Why would you be any better on opposing trade deals than Donald Trump? Each of President Obama's secretaries of defense have argued we are spending too little on national security. Are they wrong? There's no scientific evidence that the Keystone Pipeline is an environmental threat. Are you denying science? Is global warming our biggest threat, greater than terrorism? Do we need to lower the corporate tax rate? If not, aren't we losing jobs to other countries where businesses choose to locate? What would you do if Russia invaded one of the Baltic states? Other than corporate wealth, so-called welfare, are you willing to cut any government spending? Aren't subsidies for green energy corporate welfare? And the last thing she'd like to have the reader writer would like to ask Clinton is Medicaid a well-run, effective program, or does it need to be reformed? How?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Jack. Here's a kind of an interesting one from the opinion page of the opinion page of the Omaha World Herald. They say Nebraska nominee in limbo. Senate ignores an emergency. When a house fire breaks out, the fire department arrives as quickly as possible to put it out. When an auto accident occurs and people are injured, emergency responders rush to the scene. This is a fundamental obligation of government. Provide critical services as needed and do so quickly when there is an emergency. Right now, there is an emergency for federal court system in Nebraska. Nebraska's judicial vacancy has gone unfilled for more than 18 months in a district with high caseloads. That situation is officially an emergency as defined by the federal court system. Nebraska is one of 34 jurisdictions facing a judicial emergency. Judicial vacancies currently total 84, with 49 nominees pending. The Nebraska judgeship has been vacant since October of 2014, when U.S. District Judge Joseph Battalion moved to senior status. Omaha attorney Robert Rossiter Jr. has been nominated to fill the post, and no lawmakers has expressed any qualms about his qualifications. His support has been bipartisan. President Barack Obama, a Democrat, nominated him after Rossiter's name was put forward by then Senator Mike Johanns and Senator Deb Fischer, both Republicans. Last October, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a meeting on Rossiter's nomination, along with 2 other judicial appointees. No committee members signaled any problems with Rossiter. Yet 6 months later, his nomination remains frozen, not because of anything to do with Rossiter, but because political warring between Senate Democrats and Republicans has slowed the judicial confirmation process to what might charitably be described as a crawl. The standoff has grown even worse as Senate Republicans balk at considering Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court. As the World Herald's Joseph Morton reports, the Senate approved a trickle of nominations earlier this year. They include a couple of Iowa judges bumped to the front of the line by Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican Iowa, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. On Monday, the Senate approved a Tennessee judge, but Rossiter's nomination remains frozen despite continued prodding by Fischer and Senator Ben Sasse, Republican Nebraska. It reflected poorly on Grassley that he opportunistically pushed the 2 Iowa judicial nominees to the front of the line, while qualified nominees like Rossiter remain in limbo. Nor did Grassley help his case when he stated this week that the Tennessee judge was the 324th Obama judicial nominee to be confirmed, compared with 326 for President George W. Bush. In reality, there's no pattern for predicting how frequently voluntary retirements and other events will create vacancies. In any case, the Senate's chief concern should be filling vacancies once nominees are properly vetted. The Senate's obligation to decide on judicial nominees, yea or nay, is particularly great when a vacancy such as Nebraska's reaches emergency status, yet Rossiter remains in limbo. By its continued neglect of this important duty, the Senate is announcing its irresponsibility and unfairly burdening Nebraska courts. It also is making an already skeptical public even more cynical about our political system. Here's Jack.
Thank you, Bill. Well, we about time to move from editorials and public pulse to living and today's living and entertainment.
Oh, right.
So I don't have any entertainment, but I have some garden news.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess being springtime, I guess it's the right time to read about gardens and flowers and those kind of things. Written by Jan Regenbach, and every Thursday at least she does have her own article called In the Garden. Getting energized in spring is not a problem for gardeners. Every day is a new adventure, with buds bursting open and green sprouts shooting up. Who can resist another trip to the garden center to pick up a few more blooming plants? August, though, is another story. When the weather is hot and humid, it's a big temptation to stay indoors in our air-conditioned houses. That's when interest in gardening can wane. But there's a cure. This spring, when you're snapping up spring bloomers, do yourself a favor. Also buy some perennials that will lift your spirits in the dog days of summer, like in August. Here's a sampling of summer bloomers that may not look promising in their spring pots, but will reward you with their good looks and easy care when the weather turns hot. First example or sample, sea holly. Let me see. Author Tracy DeBato writes that this sun-loving perennial is tolerant of neglect during dry summers when you can't seem to make it out to the gardens with a sprinkler. Silver blue oval flowers stand upright from spin collars and called brackets. These unusual flowers are not only pretty in the garden, but they're also last long, but also long lasting, cut or dried. Sea holly plants generally grow 2 or 3 feet tall, but there is also a foot tall dwarf variety called blue hobbit. And there's another example. Blueberry lily is an idea for the hot days of summer. The orange flowers spotted with red dots, wow, sounds pretty, have earned this plant another common name, leopard lily. The fan-shaped leaves resemble those of their relatives and the irises. This perennial is undemanding and will take about anything except these dense shade or poorly drained soil. After the flowers fade, pods open to expose clusters of shiny black seeds that look like berries. I let the seed stalks stand until the first fall frost to prolong their showy atmosphere. Although this next one called a stevie have a reputation of thirsty plants that require diligent watering in summer, there's something worth knowing. Chinese astrabee varieties are more tolerant of drought. They include, for example, violet red purple candles, white milk and honey, and lavender pink punelia. And the last one here is called dwarf goat's beard. It makes a great 8-inch edging in shady beds with its ferny foliage and creamy white summer flowers. I didn't understand all that, but it sounds pretty.
It does sound pretty. And this is kind of an interesting story. Octopus escapes tank, slips down a pipe to the ocean. Inky the octopus didn't even try to cover his tracks. By the time the staff at New Zealand's National Aquarium noticed that he was missing, telltale suction cup prints were the main clue to an easily solved mystery. Inky had said "see ya" to his tank mate, slipped through a gap left by maintenance workers at the top of his enclosure, and as evidenced by the tracks, made his way across the floor to a 6-inch wide drain. He squeezed his football-sized body in. Octopuses are very malleable, aquarium manager Bob Yarl said, and made a break for the Pacific. The cephalopod version of Shawshank Redemption took place 3 months ago, but it only became public Tuesday. This isn't the first time that a captive octopus decided to take matters into its own hands or tentacles. In 2009, after a 2-spotted octopus at the Santa Monica Pier Aquarium in California took apart a water recycling valve, directed a tube to shoot water out of the tank for 10 hours, and caused a massive flood, Scientific American asked octopus expert Jennifer Mather about octopus's intelligence and previous hijinks. They are very strong, and it is practically impossible to keep an octopus in a tank unless you're very lucky. Octopuses simply take things apart, Mather said. I recall reading about someone who had built a robot submarine to putter around in a large aquarium tank. The octopus got a hold of it and took it apart piece by piece. There's a famous story from the Brighton Aquarium in England 100 years ago that an octopus there got out of its tank at night when no one was watching, went to the tank next door and ate one of the lumpfish, and went back to his own tank and was sitting there the next morning. Jarl said the New Zealand aquarium has no plans to replace Inky, but it does intend to better secure the tank where now just one octopus remains. They are always exploring, and they are great escape artists, Jarl said. We'll be watching the other one. Here's Jack.
Thank you. Heloise is what we've got next here. Some letters to Heloise and letters back from Heloise. Dear Heloise, how this starts out, and it's written by John J. from Dayton, Ohio. I know his last name is. Dear Heloise, I read your column suggesting that people stop using fabric softener on their bath towels. And then Heloise breaks in here. The hint was not to stop altogether, but to use fabric softener only when needed, not to overuse it, especially on bath towels. On to the letter. Well, I'm 69 and retired, and I took your idea to the next level. I washed my next load of all my dirty clothes with no softener, and I was so pleased with the results that I adopted that method for the future. And here's a bonus to that. I'm allergic to all levels of scent, so this solves that too. Even my cotton bed sheets come out smooth. Eloise has this to say, John, thanks for writing. Many folks tend to overuse liquid fabric softener. Less is more here. P.S. If bath towels are not absorbing water, lay off of the softener. Next letter, dear Eloise, I've started a new custom for our family. I take off all the Christmas ornaments from the artificial tree and turn it into a holiday tree. For January, winter, white foam balls and snowflakes. I don't know if they put this on the tree or what. Anyway, she goes through all 12 months. January's winter, white foam balls. In February, Valentine's, everything's red. March, St. Patrick's Day, everything's green. April, Easter, plastic eggs. May, spring is pastel flowers. June, summer sun, picnics and beaches. July, patriotic red, white, and blue. August, back to school. September, autumn leaves, red, yellow, and orange flowers. October, Halloween, witches, spiders, and black cats. November, Thanksgiving, cornucopia, and harvest. December, Christmas. So much fun to celebrate family times, and it can also include birthdays, celebrations. Mark from Columbus, Ohio, wrote that cheery article. Dear Eloise, the next letter. How do you get black mold off of a plastic bathtub mat? Gene from Dillon, South Carolina, wrote that one. Gene, rubber bath mats can be put in washing machines using hot water, your regular detergent, and 1 cup of household bleach. Allow to dry naturally. Add a few white bath towels for a little scrubbing action. That's what Eloise writes. Here's the next letter. Dear Eloise, if you are on the ground level and use Venetian blinds, stand aside by the window and look out. If you can see the ground, no one can see in. A person by the name of Dottie wrote in earlier, apparently. And Eloise says, Dottie means when looking out, you cannot see out horizontally, but can see down to the ground. Really? I don't know that. Eloise, I think you're off of it. Okay. I learned this when I visited a friend and could see through her whole apartment. And Eloise said, you're right. If the blinds, If the blinds, that's a big deal. Blinds are horizontal. Okay. You're right. The blinds are tilted or turned at an angle down toward the ground. It's hard. Someone to see directly into your room. And here's the last letter to Eloise. Dear Eloise, I read your column every day in the Delaware Gazette. I have found a use for the crumbs at the bottom of the potato chip bag, namely this. Mix them with peanut butter. It holds the crispiness of the chips for a long time. Try it. I think you will enjoy the texture and the taste. Okay.
Okay. Moving on. Here's Ask Amy. She says, abusive father now expects an apology from daughter. Dear Amy, my parents got divorced when I was a toddler. My father was very abusive verbally and physically, so I did not have a relationship with him aside from a few court-ordered visits that he showed up to. My mother died when I was 10, and my dad had no interest in raising me, so I spent time in foster homes before finally landing with a family of a friend. Grown now and with children of my own, I have always wanted to reach out to my dad. I've invited him to my kids' birthdays and called occasionally, although I knew I would never receive an apology from him, as he doesn't see anything wrong with how he treated us. I was shocked when we met for lunch and he expected me to apologize for the awful things I said to him as a child. I do not remember these incidents, but I did apologize, hoping that we could move on. I can't help but to resent him, and I find it ridiculous that he can hold a grudge for things I might have said when I was a child. How can I tell him how I feel? I know it's silly to expect an apology, but I would like to tell him my feelings. Would a letter be acceptable as he rarely answers or returns my calls? Or am I better off keeping my feelings to myself? Signed an estranged daughter, dear daughter. You are trying to have a relationship with your father, but the abusive and neglectful father who abandoned you as a child has obviously not magically morphed into a loving and kindly grandfather to your children. His manipulative insistence on some sort of apology from you is evidence that he is not equipped to be in a family in a way that you want him to be. Write your father a letter. Tell him every single thing you want to say. Ask for what you want. If you want him to be involved in your family's life, then tell him that. Offering ideas of how that might be possible, make a copy of the letter to keep. I predict either no response or a negative, possibly very negative response where your father really throws it down, possibly dragging you and your late mother through the mud. However, all of this might help you to make better sense of your own situation growing up and now. You may have to mourn the loss of possibility, which your father has always represented, but then you should celebrate what a stellar survivor and success you are and hug your own children extra close. Given the extreme challenges of your childhood, professional therapy could have a profound impact on you. Dear Amy, my daughter is headed to college in the fall. I have always tried to have open conversations about dating, sex, alcohol, consequences, and healthy choices. But college is a new adventure, whole new adventure. Can you recommend any resources that would help me with a discussion about sex, hookups, date rape, binge drinking, drugs, and healthy choices? Signed, a worried mom. Dear Worried, there are several frankly written guides designed to help students prepare for the reality of college life. One guide I like is published by the people behind hercampus.com, HERCAMPUS.com, which is an internet site with on-campus chapters of women at several dozen colleges across the country. Check out the Her Campus Guide to College Life, How to Manage Relationships, Stay Safe and Healthy, Handle Stress, and Have the Best Years of Your Life by Stephanie Kaplan Lewis, Ann Chandler Wang, Windsor Hanger West, and Her Campus Editors, the 2015 Adams Media. And the last, Dear Amy, I read your column regularly and had to get on the letter from worried mother who has a mother-in-law who clearly favors one grandchild over his siblings. We had a similar situation with our children. The oldest could do no wrong, went on special visits, received gifts, and had his own room at Grandma's house. While it wasn't the only factor in our decision, it was definitely part of the reason we moved 600 miles away. That was 25 years ago, and I can say it was one of the best decisions we ever made. I hope this grandmother reads your column and takes heed. Signed, Happy We Left. And she says, Dear Happy, I have received scores of responses from parents and from other adults whose grandparents openly favored siblings. The effects of overt favoritism seem to last for a lifetime. Here's Jack.
I got two little short articles. The first one is history. This day, kind of an important date. Back in 1865, Abraham Lincoln was shot by John F. Booth and died. In 1775, the first American Society for the Abolition of Slavery was formed in Philadelphia. 1828, the first edition of the Webster's Library was published. In 1912, the Titanic sunk after it hit an iceberg. 1939, the John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, was first published. What else? 1995, Burl Ives died. He was 85. And I got to listen. It's one of the not cartoon, funny papers, I guess. It's Pickles. I kind of like Pickles. One has, grandma and grandpa, and usually a couple of grandkids. So first, there's four what you can call pictures, four things that is the cartoon. And the granddaughter is sitting on the armchair where grandpa is sitting down, and no, it's dad. And she says, Dad, just because you're an old man doesn't mean you don't need to take care of your hair anymore. And there's hardly any hair on his head. She keeps on talking. I mean, you want to look good for mom, don't you? And he replies, well, with your bad eyesight, no. Well, she keeps on talking. With her bad eyesight, I doubt that she even cares. And then the last thing, Grandma comes in. He's right, Sylvia, who is the granddaughter. As long as he smells okay, I'm fine. As long as he smells okay. A lot of that going on.
Good measuring stick.
Yeah.
Well, moving on to business and markets. October 1st deadline. 5 big banks told to shore up crisis plans from Washington. Federal regulators say 5 of the biggest banks in the United States failed to develop adequate plans for how they might reshape themselves in case of bankruptcy, which could leave them unable to survive without another taxpayer bailout. J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Bank of New York Mellon, and State Street Bank were cited Wednesday by the Federal Reserve and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation for gaps in their bankruptcy plans known as living wills that they were required to submit. The 5 banks, totaling about $5.6 trillion in assets, were among 8 banks whose plans were evaluated. The 2 agencies found that the 5 banks' plans are not credible or are insufficient for an orderly restructuring in the event of bankruptcy. The regulators gave the banks an October 1st deadline to fix the problems or possibly face more stringent requirements, including ordering the banks to beef up their capital cushions against unforeseen losses. If regulators aren't satisfied, banks could be forced to sell off assets. Even so, the big banks are in strong financial shape and are facing no threat of collapse. The living will assessments are part of regulators' efforts to avoid another taxpayer bailout of Wall Street banks in a crisis, and to end this perception that the government would step in and rescue them. Meanwhile, several major banks this week are expected to report weak earnings for the first quarter. J.P. Morgan reported Wednesday that its first quarter profit fell more than 8% from a year ago. And just a little note here, filming at a restaurant gets people buzzing. For the past week, the phone at La Casa Pizzeria has rung nonstop. Even Wednesday afternoon, a day after film crews for Alexander Payne's new film Downsizing shot the exterior of the restaurant at 44th and Leavenworth, and its iconic neon sign, people called the restaurant wondering if they could get a glimpse of Hollywood. Everyone is asking, is Matt Damon going to eat at La Casa? Said Victor Hahn, the dining room manager. It's exciting. People are interested in the whole filming process. Hahn said the activity has been a huge plus for La Casa. When you get your name in the paper several times a week and people are buzzing about La Casa on social media, that gets people excited. It's good publicity, he said. Hahn said Tuesday was quite an interesting day at La Casa with film crews shooting near the entrance. The restaurant even stayed open about an hour past closing time so the film crew could eat after it wrapped up for the day. 11:43. Here's Jack.
Yeah, that thing's been around for a long time. La Casa.
Oh,
Pizzeria.
goodness. Yeah.
I know a woman, she died, but she lived to be like 98. And she lived probably 10 miles from here. But when her son would visit her about once a year, that's where she wanted to go. To the La Casa Pizza, that's where I want to go.
Well, the thing about La Casa that's a little different is they use Romano cheese, I have been told.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah.
Which gives it a little different taste, I guess.
The texture, maybe even.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah. Well, here's a couple briefs from the rest of the world Herald here. U.S. auto sales fell last month. No, U.S. retail sales, I'm sorry. The headline reads, drop in autos. What is? U.S. retail sales fell last month as Americans could cut back on their car purchases. The latest sign that consumers are reluctant to spend freely. A 2.1% plunge in auto sales, the steepest such fall in more than a year, accounted for most of last month's drop. But sales were weak in some other sections, including clothing, restaurants, and at online and catalog stores. Overall, retail sales fell by a seasonally adjusted 0.3% in March. And Verizon, you may have heard this is kind of news before about Verizon. About 39,000 Verizon landline and cable workers on the East Coast walked off the job yesterday after little progress in talks since their contract was expired nearly 8 months ago. The workers are members of two unions that represent workers in the eastern states and say Verizon wants to freeze pensions, make layoffs easier, and rely more on contract workers. Verizon has said there are health issues for retirees and current workers and that the company wants greater flexibility to manage its workers. It said it has trained non-union workers to fill in. And the company that makes the airbags for cars, let me see, about 85 million airbag inflators that haven't been recalled are inside cars and trucks are being driven in the U.S. and would have to be replaced if the company can't prove that they are safe. The number would be in addition to the nearly 30 million inflators already slated for replacement in what has become the largest automobile recall in the nation's history.
Thank you. Takata, they got in big trouble. In sports, Nebraska athletics, extra interviews add to the cost of NU survey. Interviews and surveys being done as part of an independent study of the University of Nebraska Lincoln Athletic Department have been completed, but the work that began in January cost more than expected. The original contract with Silverstone Group of Omaha put the price at $30,000 to $38,000 to examine the leadership and culture of NU sports under Athletic Director Sean Eichhorst, who began in Lincoln in October of 2012. The total has been revised to $42,000 to $45,000 to accommodate additional interviews, Melissa Lee, spokeswoman in University System President Hank Bound's office, said Wednesday. Originally, all Husker athletic coaches, staff members, and general employees were to be interviewed in person or were to fill out an electronic survey. The World Herald learned that among extra interviews done were some with former employees who lost their jobs after Eichhorst's arrival, either by firing or consolidation of departments. Lee said the final report on the interview and survey findings is being written. The date for presentation to NU officials or possible public release remains open. Eichhorst told the World Herald on Tuesday that he welcomes the study of his program and doesn't consider such questioning a shot across the bow. Absolutely not, he said. I actually see us as a model program at the university. Here's Jack.
Well, here's some personnel changes, I guess I'll call it generally. About so 3 recruits stay with the football program. 3 of the 5 signers in the 2016 Nebraska basketball. 3 of the 5 signers in the 2016 Nebraska women's basketball recruiting class have already confirmed they'll stick with Nebraska, despite a coaching change from Connie to Amy Williams. Guard Hannah White of Barnville, Wisconsin, wing Nicaea Liley of Colorado Springs, and guard Grace Mitchell of Wellington, Kansas, all told this newspaper, via text that they're coming to Nebraska. All 3 have talked to Williams. Yes, for sure. You can tell she's passionate about the game and has lots of energy, and she played at Nebraska, Mitchell said by text. Excited to get up here for the summer. 2 other signees, guard McCole Payton of Stockton, California, and point guard Kathleen Doyle of Leslie, Illinois, are technically still connected to Nebraska, but considering other schools. They are the 2 highest rated prospects in Nebraska's class. Doyle was Miss Basketball in Illinois as Benet Academy won the state title and finished the season as one of the top teams in the nation. Clayton played on a loaded team at St. Mary's High School, but is considered a top 100 prospect. The 6'2" Mitchell was an under the radar prospect who didn't play much AAU basketball and had previously toiled at a small school in Kansas before transferring to Wellington as a senior. She had a sparkling season, averaging 21 points and 6.5 rebounds. She shot 48% from the three-point range. Wow. Range, hitting more than 3 3-pointers per game. The 5'9" Whittish was named Miss Basketball in Wisconsin, averaging just over 24 points. She shot 47% from the three-point range. Eli Lee, 6'1", had a breakout year for Rampart, averaging just over 21 points and just over 17 rebounds. Yori had expected Ellie to be one of the team's best defenders as well. Boy, even
Thank you, Jack.
didn't Yori come from Creighton down to Nebraska some years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Like 10 years ago or something like that.
I don't recall.
Yeah, because I know Creighton could only afford so much. I remember whatever she was paid, $250 or something like that. She got, I think it was over $1 million for Nebraska.
Yeah. Oh, yes. A big time, huh?
Yeah.
Well, here's kind of an interesting story, and this is about, it's Tom Chattel's column. 25 years after the College World Series run, Hendry at times second guesses his exit. What if he had never left? It seems like a silly question to ask Jim Hendry. After all, it seems like he never left Creighton. It seems like he always has been there, like it's always 1991. But it's been 25 years since his Blue Jays were the first men on the moon. 25, imagine that. This weekend, they'll celebrate the anniversary of their College World Series team. Only 3 Jays among that year will be missing. Among them, Brian O'Connor, busy coaching the defending NCAA champion Virginia club. Their leader arrives on Friday at noon. He's 60 now, but he'll look like he stepped right out of their 1991 CWS opener against Clemson. Hendry always had a Dick Clark quality about him, ageless, timeless. That guy, hired in 1984 at the age of 28, selling the dream on the old CU sandlot. His battery never dies. I caught up with him on Wednesday night. He was at a game near Atlanta scouting for the Yankees, where he is a special assistant to general manager Brian Cashman. Hendry has lived in ballparks, locker rooms, and airports since he left Creighton in 1991 for the Florida Marlins, launching a quarter-century career in pro baseball, including a stint from 2002 to 2011 at the Chicago Cubs as the Chicago Cubs general manager. These days, he spends his season evaluating minor league prospects and major league players who could help New York in trades or free agency. He's always found time to come back to his home, away from home, Omaha. He still has good friends at CU, goes on golf trips with athletic director Bruce Rasmussen, calls baseball coach Ed Cervais when he can. He's Jim Hendry, Creighton dad, too. Daughter Lauren is a sophomore at CU. Mostly when he's here, he's Jim Hendry on command and in demand. For instance, a few years ago, Hendry brought Hall of Fame pitcher Greg Maddux to speak at the Spring Blue Jay Bash. Maddux golfed with the Boosters, but he's not much on speaking. At the dinner, Hendry ended up speaking. Both hung out afterwards with Boosters, and once again it was time to tell the same stories that never get old, always 1991. This weekend, that 1991 team and season will go into the Creighton Athletic Hall of Fame. They're the first to go in as a team, very appropriate. The ringleader will be Hendry, as always. On his way here, he had time for a little reminiscing, including the questions I've always wanted to ask. Question: can you believe it's been 25 years? No, it doesn't seem like it's been that long. I still see some of the guys once in a while. A lot of us stay in touch. We've been so lucky. Everyone turns out well, and everyone is still around. Question: do you still get asked about 1991? Yes, even when Brian Cashman introduces me to someone, he'll say, that team from Omaha that went to the College World Series, Jim coached them. I'll see major league players who will tell me they remember watching that series. They remember our team. I still get a lot of that. Question: can you still hear the sounds of that CWS? Close your eyes and see it. I don't think I've ever had a day like that day at the Clemson game. One of my favorite memories of that year is running out for the introductions before that game. The stadium was electric. The city of Omaha was just different that week. We always felt like we were pretty good, but when we got to that series, it was a whole different level. I still think about that day. I don't think I'll ever have a better day in my life. Question: why have you spent so much time in Omaha over the years? He says he comes back 5 or 6 times a year. Answer: probably because it is a great time in my life. I have so many great memories, so many great people who helped us get started. I'm very indebted to the people at Creighton and Omaha. I came here at 28, a guy nobody knew, hadn't done anything. They gave me my chance here. There are so many people who contributed to our cause, stood behind us, gave us a fighting chance. I don't know if we could have gone to the series without them. I owe so much to Don Leahy, former athletic director at CU and UNO. He didn't hire me, but he took over when I was young, trying to figure it out. He didn't have to keep me. He could have gotten his own guy. We were at 500, grinding away. He believed in what we were doing, and I'll never forget that. Who knows where I'd be? I'm a lucky guy. I've gotten to do a lot of things. There wouldn't have been a Chicago Cubs or Yankees or Marlins without Creighton and the people of Omaha, and certainly the players at Creighton. I knew early on that year they were different. They really gave a damn about what happened out there. In baseball, that isn't always the case. Question: do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left Creighton? Answer: I do think about that sometimes. I knew we were going to be good for a while. We had it going. We could get any players we wanted from around here and in Chicago. I couldn't see it going backwards. The Marlins thing just happened out of nowhere. I wasn't going to get another college job, not after going to the CWS. Sometimes I ask myself, why did I leave? What if I had stayed? Question: why did you leave? Answer: I had other college opportunities, but when I was approached by the Marlins, it was a major league and it was expansion. They courted me for a long time. I looked at it like this was my chance to get into pro baseball. I figured I could always come back to college and coach if it didn't work out. I really didn't want to leave. Question: can you see yourself getting back into coaching? A lot of guys coach long after age 60. Answer: I don't think that's in the cards. I still love the game, but the game has evolved. Kids have evolved. And the last question: can you see yourself living in Omaha when you retire from baseball? Answer: yes, absolutely. I can see myself winding up there. The city and the people are as good as it gets. To me, it is like home. Here's Jack.
Thank you. Here's some football news. Whether it was a defender on the field shouting as he settled into his stance or a veteran teammate watching from the sideline, a pre-snap warning could be heard in almost every passing situation at Saturday's scrimmage. Screen. It's been a point of emphasis all spring for the Husker offense, something the unit's defensive counterparts had on their minds as they prepared their pursuit of the quarterback. As it turned out, Nebraska didn't call many screen passes during their game-like season Saturday, but these deceptive short throws when blockers let pass rushers by before advancing to take out second-level defenders will most certainly play an important role in Nebraska's attack this year. We've been working hard on this offensive line, Coach Mike Cavanaugh said. It's got to be a big part of our game. We've got to execute it. Cavanaugh's group may have the most influence in whether that happens. The success of the screen pass so often relies on the offensive linemen. They have so subtly give up of a rush lane, then hastily move downfield as they find a target to engage. If the defense gets to the quarterback too quickly or the pass catcher doesn't have enough space, the play has no chance of happening. We've just got to cover guys to get it started, Kavanaugh said. The Huskers weren't as efficient as they would have liked last year. On the conventional screen passes to running backs, the Huskers averaged just under 6 yards per attempt. They completed just 4 of 7 screens to tight ends, totaling 18 yards. One of those resulted in an interception. Nebraska does have a variety of screens for receivers, particularly those that single out defensive backs along the sideline. But on the 10 receiver screens over the middle that the Huskers ran last year, they averaged just over 7.5 yards per attempt. We want to really do better on the screens, Coach Mike Riley said. Historically, we have been a really, really good screen team. We were really average screen team last year. We want to get that back. They've used specific portions of spring practice to address it at times. They worked against a makeshift scout team just to nail down the basics as best as they could. Kavanaugh points out that it would probably a little easier for blockers if they could take out defenders or at least slow them down by diving at their feet. There's an injury risk, Will. It's so that technique, which can be used in games, isn't part of Nebraska's practice this spring. So 300-pound offensive linemen have to find other ways to stay in front of speedy defensive backs or instinctive linebackers. Well, 12 o'clock noon here, Mr. Bill.
Yeah.
And it's good to be with you reading the news as we find it in
Good stuff
our
today,
newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a little, those
Mm-hmm.
newsy news or something, yeah. And I still like pickles.
Yeah.
I have to point that out to my wife tonight.
So, have a great afternoon, folks.
Yes, you have to take care of yourself the rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of your morning live reading. Thank you to both our volunteer readers and all of our volunteers that we have here at the Radio Festival Shepherd. I'm going to go on the list of programming for the day. Thank you so much for listening to your Radio Festival Shepherd, and keep listening.
Oh, she is.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know what to do with it on the newspaper.
There's a box out here by Brian's office.
Oh, is it?
Or out there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it out there.
Oh,
That's what I do, so I'll just take two of them. Well.
We get the reverse image here. You're close. Oh, yeah. I guess it's not reverse. Or, yeah, I don't know.
Well, you're farther away here, and you're farther away there too.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey, hello.
thanks, gentlemen.
Certainly, our pleasure. May we ask your name?
Yeah.
Oh, I am Emily.